something I'm really interested in finding evidence for, and so many times I've come across different interviews and different people speaking, talking about this trend of people's becoming more clairvoyant and more telepathic. And even weirdly, groups of people who are connected with a common bond, chatting the next day over breakfast and finding they had almost identical dreams. And of course, this was always the thing of the past with the prophets and the shaman. It's like going into this, well, the Aborigines called it the dream time, didn't they? They talked about going into this other world that mirrored the physical world, but was just as real. And you traveled in there and experienced and saw things and came back and passed that on to the people. It was like we talk about the book of Revelations, but of course the whole idea of a revelation, and even Einstein, this is where it's so interesting, that unseen world side of life that gets sort of squashed and hidden. Einstein with his theory of relativity, and he had a run of about 5 years where he just made these perceptions and these understandings that changed science like forever. But he himself said he had a connection. He didn't call it God, but he said this connection to the old one, and he was talking about some kind of unseen world's power, intelligence. He openly admitted that's where it came from, because he used to come home from working at the patent office in Zurich or wherever it was, very mundane administrative job, and they'd have dinner, and then he'd sit there just at the kitchen table with a notepad and a pencil, and he'd write and he'd think, and something would come, and then it's published. Theory of relativity changes science. It came through from somewhere else. A lot of the prophecy and what you're talking about is about turning more to that direction rather than the physical.
Yeah, and that would open up another whole conversation another time to do with the heads and the hats, because
right.
That comment earlier about the human seems to be getting activated at faster and faster levels of its system, because we have a slow digestion system, breathing is faster, the blood is faster than the digestion system.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of different speeds in the system when you get through to the nerves and in the brain. But there is all this in the auric system, there is this area here above the brain. So in terms of a hierarchy, you're talking about a specific area of our space, which if there is a higher frequency coming in, you would expect them to come in through this area. So it jumps over to the territory of funny hats worn through history, especially in religion, like the mitre of the Catholic thing, where it's actually open. It's not a closed hat, it's open, as if it's ready to catch something.
Right.
Similar to the crown, The idea is that the crown of the king or queen, they're open to catch something, right? They're the head of the state, but the head is not closed. It's set. In fact, there's some esoteric knowledge that says that soft part inside the crown, has the kind of points around the top.
Made out of felt or silk or something. Yeah,
made out of felt or something. It's meant to represent the brain. In other words, the whole thing is an opening for force to come in. But what that says is, if this force is really coming in to do with these times, and there's a pressure coming in, a new level of energy coming in, it's going to come in through the system. And if the brain is perhaps concerned with more temporary things or fantastical things, in other words, unreal things, that a person's not lined up right in their thinking, is that going to cause more of a surge of mental problems?
Yeah.
And emotional problems?
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know in New Zealand, but here, and you can see in world news, it does seem to be people are kind of popping in strange ways with their reactions and behaviors.
We can't get enough psychiatrists to meet demand, and then they burn out after a couple of years having been trained, and so it's a perpetual problem. And what you're saying about the hats, and here's a weird connection with the Mayan calendar. So the Mayan calendar, it ended December the 21st, 2012. And of course, we got all this doom and gloom from the mainstream media as per usual. But one of the... Sorry?
There was a good movie came out of it, right?
Yeah, and look, I read an interview with the director of that movie, and he said, "Oh no, we didn't think it was real. It just sounded like a really terror. It was a horror movie, basically, like a modern horror movie. We just thought this would be great to scare people half to death." But see, the lovely thing is there's only 2 references to what was actually going to happen when the Mayan calendar came to an end, because so much of it had been destroyed and lost. So there's an inscription on a wall in a temple, and then there's a little book made of vellum or goat skin or whatever it is, which is kept in Germany. And on the last page of that, it has this amazing diagram where there's a figure at the bottom of the panel, and above it is another figure pouring like a jar of water onto its head, onto its funny little hat. I think what you were talking about there is exactly what they were indicating. And then above that figure is what they call the starry deer crocodile, and it's very similar to Nut in Egypt. That female figure that spans the sky and the sun passes through it in its day and night journey. And that is also pouring water over everybody and everything. And, this is where they got this idea of a massive flood. But of course, in esoteric knowledge and religious history, the water is always to do with a spiritual influence. That's why when the Nile flooded in Egypt, it had a physical level where it allowed you to grow crops and to feed everybody. But also that, again, with yearly cycles and cycles over hundreds of years, that was also a time of an influx of new energy into the planet, where spiritually everything came alive and was refreshed and began in a new cycle. So, yeah, just quite incredible that they obviously had this knowledge, because he could have had water pouring on the guy's foot or into his bathtub, but no, it's directly onto his head, onto his hat, his like mental apparatus. And that's what they were actually indicating, was moving into a new time with a new influence coming out of the universe and into the human race.
Which again is a lot, we said earlier, a lot of these prophecies interconnect with their symbology or references, because that is also the symbol for Aquarius, isn't it? The
That's
water,
very Aquarian,
being poured down over, which seems to talk about a kind of a wave or an influx of this energy. Back to the Aborigine, for example, the elders, some Aboriginal elders are saying that the dream time is informing them that a wave is coming.
Wow.
But they mystically, they say it's not a water wave.
No.
It's some kind of spiritual wave, some sort of fire wave. They don't say much about it, except that Uluru, which we call Ayers Rock, that rock in the center of Australia, which is sacred to the Aborigine, is becoming activated.
Wow.
Because they say there's many different ley lines cross or interconnect with it. And they say that the rainbow serpent is rising out and traveling out along these ley lines, which is to do with like the power of the sun, the solar power, because the rainbow, is the sun power splitting into the 7, making it the rainbow.
Yes.
So that talks about, if power is coming in, then the different ley line systems around the planet, we had a video about the ley lines, are gonna be charged up. So I personally know a few groups that love to visit ley lines, and they're commenting that they feel that the power is more evident, it's more easy to detect. This is one of those areas that it's going to be part of the result of this incoming force, if what we're saying is proves to be true.